Okay, this video is going to be showing the process of rebuilding a Neptune T10DC Backflow prevention water meter. In my experience, I've been in the utilities industry since 2001. I got my backflow certification in 2002, repair in 2003, and as of 2017, I've tested over 10,000 backflows and probably repaired at least 1,000, probably a little more than that. So what we have the check module number 1 in here, the number 2 in here, and then the measuring chamber here. A common tool I use is a pick, a little 90-degree pick. Neptune sells a module removal tool. It's a little fancier, and most people don't have one of those, so that's why I'm going to use the pick. I also have channel locks. We have check number 1, check number 2. We have our O-rings. Got 2 different sizes. We get these from McMaster Car. Size 133 is the smaller, and you're going to use 4. Size 136 is larger, and you're going to use 2. The larger ones go on the ends of the shutoff modules, and then the 133s are used for the check modules. Also, you're going to need the food grade grease. I use a variety of different versions of food grade, but I picked this one just because you can see it says food grade. You don't want to use anything that's not food grade when working with backflow devices. I also have a small impact wrench, which makes pulling the chamber cover off really easy. There's also a Dremel, and on some of the older backflows you may need the Dremel to clean off the rubber O-rings that stick to the brass inside. Comes in handy. I use a stainless steel brush. I have one of these on the repair bench, and I also have one of these in my work vehicle. Okay, we're going to start off with removing check number 1. Take the pick and kind of move it around until I find the end of the ring. I kind of dig in there, catch it, and then I drag it around. You can drag it around, or once you get enough, you can get your hands in there. Just pull it. I'm going to take channel locks, and I grip firmly. Sometimes the thumb wheel comes off. It's okay. Just have a spare. That comes out. Your strainer comes out. You're going to, oftentimes you'll find the strainer's got a lot of rust in it, so you need to rinse that out. If you find rust in the strainer, you should almost always replace the chamber, because you're going to have scoring. And if the meter's got a lot of miles on it, maybe 1,000,000 miles or more, or it's 8-10 years old, that I would recommend replacing the chamber anyway. It's always a good idea. Then you got a separation ring that comes out, and then use the pick to pluck out the check 1 O-ring. Now, some of the early Neptune T10DCs from, I would say, 1995 to probably about 1998 used red O-rings, and the problem with those is they would bond to the brass, and you'll end up picking them out piece by piece, just little, like it's a struggle to get them out, and you just got to keep picking at them and picking at them until you get all the pieces out. And so, pulling out the old check, all I do is stick the pick into the check. You don't want to stick the pick into a new check, because you could damage the seat or you could damage the rubber. So only pulling old checks out is what I use the pick for. Now, if you have an older body that either has the red O-rings, or you have some issues with debris or something sticking to the side, you want to use a Dremel. I use a Dremel just like this. And the Dremel with a stainless steel brush is a great way to get rid of the rubber that's attached to the body, especially if it's one of those old red O-rings. But this is a new meter, so we don't have to do that. So we're going to take our new O-ring, or our new check valve, check number 1, and there's a little pin at the bottom, and you want to make sure that pin lines up with the opening inside, or the small opening. The pin lines up for that. You could also see these vertical lines, and the way I center them is I'll take the pick and I'll kind of wiggle it back and forth, pushing while I'm wiggling, and it will drop in. And once it drops in, you're good. And you take one of your new O-rings, kind of push it in with your finger, and then once it's in place, you take the pick and you kind of, I do it like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, just like that, and then I'll push in the remaining pieces. And then once everything's almost pushed in, you take the pick on the back side and you drag it over the O-ring to push it in place. Now there's another method where you could just stack everything in here, and then when you push the cover, it pushes everything in. That's another way of doing it. So we have the separator, drop the separator in, and then put the strainer back together. I always rinse it out, get rid of all the rust that's in there. And then we have one more O-ring, or O-ring here that drops in on this side of the separator, and the shutoff module gets its own O-ring, the larger 136. And then when you're ready, there's a little notch. It's probably hard to see, but there's a little notch on the side with the opening, and you always want that to line up with the little notch that's here. And once you line that up, if it's easy, you can push it in with your fingers. On some of the older ones, I will tap it in. I've done that for years, rarely have a problem. Every once in a while, tapping it will cause it to leak. Then you got to replace the shutoff module, but the vast majority of the time they don't leak. So after that, take this, kind of open it up a little bit with your finger, push it into the groove. Oh, if this doesn't allow you to get the ring in completely, then you likely have not seated the pin on the back of the check module into the hole, because it will be raised. So if you're fighting it, then pull it apart and check that again. So I hook it in, and then I just feed it in with my fingers, and then I'll take the channel locks and squeeze it so that it seats in properly. That's check number 1. Alright, now we're going to work with check number 2, which is a little easier than number 1. Again, we take the pick, kind of drag it around until we can find the edge of the ring, which is right here. Kind of pry in, pull it up. Okay. Then you take it, kind of feed your fingers around. Bingo. Again, you take the channel locks, you can squeeze, wiggle back and forth. Then you take the pick, pluck out the old O-rings, separator, and then you can pull it out with the pick. And remember, You never want to put the pick into the check, a new check, because that can damage the seat and it can damage the rubber. You only want to use the pick for removing checks. So, and again with this, like I mentioned before on check 1, a lot of the older ones from 1995 until probably about 98 used red O-rings, and they would bond with the brass, so you may have a situation where you have to use a Dremel, or you'll have to pick them out and use a Dremel. Some people don't bother doing that and they just scrap the meter, but I can tell you, I've been working with those ever since I started in 2003 repairing, and there's plenty of them that I actually took the time to pick out the red O-rings, cleaned them, and I'm still repairing them today. They're still active in service. So once you take the time to get the red O-rings out, it's not going to give you any more problems. Alright, so we bring our new check 2, drop it in, kind of tap it around. There's no orientation pin on that, so however it goes in, you just want to make sure that you put this side in. You'll know pretty quick if you get something backwards because it's not going to work right. And then we got our O-ring. Again, we kind of push it in with our finger, and then do the 12, 3, 6, 9 positioning, and then pushing it in between. And once you've pushed it in and it's fairly even, you take the pick on the back side, the 90, and you kind of rotate, and then you go back and forth until it's smooth. Again, that's the way I've been doing it, but there's other ways where you can put the O-ring in, then put the retainer in, put everything else in, and then push it all in together. So we're going to put this, you got to rinse everything out. You know, I'd rinse this out if there's any rust. Make sure it's all clean. After the retainer, we put another O-ring. And then we use, that's a 133, and then we use the 136 on the end shutoff module. And again, we make sure that we have our pin, our alignment pin. It's a little notch, and that goes, there's another notch right here. I don't know if you can see it in the light. And then that pushes in. And then after that, take the ring, feed it in just like check 1. And once it's in, you take the channel locks and then spread them out. And that's check number 2. Okay, now we're going to change the chamber out. Anytime you find any rust in the checks or in the strainer, you should always replace the chamber because you probably had rust moving through it. Now, chamber cover gaskets can kind of be stuck in some of them, but using the pick you can just pluck them out. You have a strainer. The best way I've found to pull the strainer is to use the pick and kind of hook it in there, pluck it out. Now sometimes they're older, and when you pick it up here, it won't move, and this will kind of bend up. So then you just got to go in a little further, and you got to hook one of these holes. So that's out. Then you have to push it away, if possible. Push it away from connection surface there, and then just pull your pieces out. And if you're curious, you'll see scoring on the ball section. It'll look like circular scratches. That usually means you had rust or sand if somebody didn't blow off the line. before they, after they made the tap, they didn't blow it off before they set the meter. You can get rust, you can get sand, it'll all scratch up here, back and forth. You may also see the scoring on the edge too, but usually you'll see it in the ball area. Now, you want to check the opening here. You may find that there's a lot of pitting, or the rubber had stuck to it, so you want to clean that out. You may want to use the Dremel. I do occasionally have to use the Dremel on that. So now we have our new chamber. Take the O-ring. Sometimes I can get away with not using any lube or grease. Other times I have to use grease to get that in there. So you want to position it so that this goes in, makes contact here. And once you get it in there, you want to kind of pick it up a little bit carefully so it doesn't come apart on you. And then make sure that the back side of the chamber lines up with the little notch for the strainer. And while you're at it, you just keep one finger pushing against this way, keeping the O-ring in place. You take your other hand and you feed this down in, and you'll see where the notch, let me see if I can zoom in here. There's a notch here. And if it lines up, you'll be able to push it right in. And then you place your chamber cover gasket, kind of put your cover back on, and I usually wiggle it like this a little bit just to make sure it seats in. I'm really not a fan of the plastic covers. We've had plenty of them over the years crack, break. If you have the opportunity to buy brass covers from Neptune, go for it. You'll never have a problem with a brass cover. Of all the brass covers we do have in the city, I've never had a problem with any one of them, at least with Neptune. We have had some Badgers, some older Badgers that have very thin, brittle covers, and they've broken after a number of years. And you want to crisscross. And that's replacing a chamber. After that, before you put the meter back in, you always want to flush the line. Let it run for enough time that the water gets clear. And after that, you can reconnect the meter and then do your backflow test before you put it back in service. So that's a basic rundown on how to repair, rebuild a Neptune T10DC backflow meter.